Hey everyone, I've noticed that many of you are enjoying the videos, but most of you haven't subscribed yet. We're super close to hitting 1,000 subscribers, and your support could help us reach that milestone. If you're enjoying the content, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It really makes a huge difference and helps us keep creating more awesome content. Thank you so much for watching and supporting. It was another one of those days. You know the kind, where everything feels off even though it looks normal on the surface. I'd just gotten home from work, filthy from the sight, and Emma was already in her going out clothes. Black dress, hair done, makeup on. She looked good, real good. But something about it rubbed me the wrong way. Lately, there's been too much of that. Too many dinners with friends, too many work meetings she wasn't giving details about. Each time she'd brush off my questions with a laugh or a quick excuse. Dinner with the girls, she'd say. Or, I'm meeting with a client. But somehow it never felt right. I couldn't pinpoint when I started noticing the little things, but they added up. Emma used to be all about casual comfort. Jeans, sweaters, sneakers. Lately, though, high heels and tight dresses had replaced her usual getup, and she'd brush on more makeup than I'd ever seen her wear in the past decade. Her phone, too. It was always in her hand now, her fingers tapping away at the screen, laughing at messages she'd hide when I walked in the room. Once or twice, I caught a glimpse of names I didn't recognize. But every time I asked, she'd shrug. It's just work stuff. Just the girls from the office. I didn't push too hard. I didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid husband who can't let his wife live her life. But damn if something didn't feel off. That evening, she grabbed her purse and flashed me a smile, the kind that used to melt me. "Paño matasame, dinner with the girls tonight," she said casually. "Where at?" She didn't even pause as she answered. "Same spot as usual. You know that little Italian place on Main?" The lie fell out of her so smoothly it made my stomach turn. I nodded, pretending to buy it, but the unease I'd been feeling lately clenched tighter in my chest. She kissed my cheek and walked out the door, leaving me alone with that sick feeling I couldn't shake. After she left, I sat down, staring at the TV, but I wasn't watching. Something gnawed at me, a nagging voice that wouldn't shut up. I tried to push it down, but it kept resurfacing. What if I was just being paranoid? Maybe I was wrong. But then, what if I wasn't? I pulled out my phone and opened up the location sharing app we'd both agreed to use years ago, mainly for safety when either of us worked late. Emma didn't know I still checked it. Usually I didn't. But tonight, that voice in my head wouldn't let it go. When I saw her location, my heart froze. She wasn't at the Italian restaurant. She wasn't even near Main Street. No, her dot sat smack in the middle of downtown, in a hotel. A fucking hotel. I sat there for a second, staring at the screen, waiting for the location to change, hoping it was some kind of glitch. Maybe she was passing by. Maybe there was a good reason, but the dot didn't move. The sick feeling inside me swelled, hardening into something colder. I closed the app and grabbed my keys. I had to know. I couldn't sit around hoping it was nothing. The truth was, deep down, I knew exactly what I'd find, and I needed to see it with my own eyes. The drive downtown was a blur. My mind was a mess of anger, hurt, and betrayal, but I tried to keep calm. No point jumping to conclusions yet, right? Maybe there was a reason she was there. Maybe she was meeting someone from work. But then again, what work meeting takes place in a hotel at 8 p.m.? When I pulled into the hotel parking lot, my heart pounded so hard it hurt. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to calm myself down. But the reality of what I was about to do weighed heavily on me. Did I really want to see this? Did I want to confirm what I already suspected? There was no turning back once I walked in there. But I couldn't let it go. If I didn't do this, the doubt would eat me alive. So I parked the truck and got out, each step toward the hotel door feeling heavier than the last. I kept telling myself to stay calm, don't make a scene. Whatever I found, I had to keep my cool. The lobby was quiet when I walked in, the soft hum of the air conditioning and the quiet chatter of a few guests barely registering in my mind. I scanned the room, my eyes darting from one corner to the next, hoping, praying I wouldn't see her. that maybe she'd be sitting at the bar alone, waiting for a friend, that this whole thing was just in my head. But then there she was, Emma, in the arms of some guy, laughing, leaning into him like she hadn't a care in the world. They stood there, close, too close. His hand slid down her back, and she let it happen like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like this wasn't our marriage she was throwing away with every second she spent in his arms. I stood there for a moment, frozen. The anger I'd been bottling up boiled over, but I forced myself to stay still. I could feel my fists clenching, my nails digging into my palms, but I wasn't going to lose it. Not yet. I walked toward them, my footsteps heavy on the marble floor. They didn't notice me at first. They were too wrapped up in each other. It wasn't until I was practically standing right in front of them that Emma turned around. Her eyes widened in shock for a split second, but then something else settled in, something cold and distant. She didn't even try to hide it. "You were never enough for me," she said, her voice icy, the words sharp and cutting. She didn't flinch as she said it, didn't back down, didn't apologize. It was like she had been waiting to say it for a long time. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. That one sentence was worse than seeing her in his arms, worse than catching her in the act. She was telling me, right to my face, that none of it mattered, that I didn't matter. But instead of letting the hurt show, I did the only thing that came to mind. I pulled out my phone, started recording, capturing every word, every expression, every disgusting smirk on her face. The guy next to her didn't even look surprised, just smug, like he had won some kind of prize. Emma's smile faltered when she realized what I was doing. She took a step back, her hand slipping out of his. "Lucas, stop," she said, her voice cracking. "You don't need to do this. You're about to ruin everything." Everything? As if she hadn't already destroyed it all herself. I didn't stop. I kept filming. She begged me to turn it off, started making promises, saying things I knew she didn't mean. But it was too late for all of that. I wasn't going to let her talk her way out of this one. "You did this," I said, my voice steady, though I could feel the rage burning just beneath the surface. "You made your choice." I walked away, still recording, and headed back to my truck. I didn't look back to see her reaction. I didn't need to. I had everything I needed to blow her life apart, and there was no going back from this. As I sat in the driver's seat, my hands gripping the steering wheel, I felt the weight of what I'd just done sink in. The truth was out now, and there was no unseeing it, no undoing the damage. But I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. Walking out of that hotel lobby, the cold night air hit me like a slap in the face, but it wasn't enough to cool the anger boiling inside me. The hotel's glass doors closed behind me, and I stood there for a second, still gripping my phone. The image of Emma and that guy burned into my mind. I replayed the last few moments in my head over and over, her face, that smirk, and then the panic when she realized I was filming. She knew the game was up, and there was no undoing what I'd seen. I got back into the truck, but instead of driving off, I sat there, staring at the hotel. My heart was still hammering in my chest. This was it. This was the moment everything changed. There was no going back, no chance of pretending like this was some minor slip-up. She made her choice, and now I had to make mine. I opened the video on my phone and watched it again, just to confirm what I already knew. There was no denying it now. The way she looked at him, the way she spoke to me. I could hear my own voice in the recording, calm and steady, though I barely remembered speaking at all. "You did this," I had said, and I meant it. She had destroyed everything we'd built, and now it was my turn to tear her world apart. For a split second, a wave of doubt washed over me. Should I confront her more? Should I give her a chance to explain? But then I remembered her words, cold and cutting. "You were never enough for me." That had been the truth, her real feelings, spilling out in the heat of the moment. No excuses, no justifications could take that back. She didn't love me, not the way a wife should. As I drove home, my mind raced. I wasn't thinking about the pain anymore. I was thinking about the next step. I needed a plan. I needed to get ahead of this. to take control before Emma even had a chance to try and manipulate the situation. My phone buzzed. I glanced down. It was her. I didn't even have to read the message to know what it would say. "Lucas, we need to talk. Please call me." I locked the phone and tossed it onto the passenger seat. There was nothing left to say that she hadn't already shown me. I had the proof, and now I needed to decide what to do with it. I didn't know how yet, but I was going to make her pay. I pulled into the driveway, the house dark except for the porch light. It was late. The kids were probably asleep, oblivious to the storm brewing just outside. For their sake, I'd have to play it cool, at least for a little while. But every time I thought about it, about Emma lying to my face, running off to that hotel while I sat here like an idiot, it fueled the fire in my gut. The next morning I woke up early, my mind still reeling from the night before. I lay in bed for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together how I'd deal with this. My phone buzzed again, more texts from Emma. She'd come home sometime in the middle of the night, probably after I had fallen asleep. I hadn't even noticed. I scrolled through her messages. "I'm so sorry. Can we please talk about this? I need to explain." There it was again, explain, like there was anything left to explain. She didn't realize I had seen everything. The arrogance, the smirk, that was the real her, and it was burned into my mind forever. I rolled out of bed, deciding not to reply. I wasn't ready to talk yet, not until I had a clear idea of what my next move would be. Downstairs, I grabbed a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, the cold light of morning seeping through the blinds. I opened my laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Divorce. That was my first thought. But it wasn't enough. It wouldn't make her feel the way I did. She had to know what it felt like to have everything ripped away from her. I needed more time to think. I pulled up the video on my phone again. This wasn't just a private matter anymore. I had something powerful now, proof. I have proof that would rip her life apart if it got out. I had to be careful, though. One wrong move, and she could play the victim. I couldn't let that happen. No, I had to be smart about this. A part of me wanted to send the video to everyone right then and there, to expose her for the liar she was. Friends, family, even her job. But I held off. Something told me I needed to wait, to make sure I was fully prepared for the fallout. I wasn't going to let this slip through my fingers. Not after everything. I leaned back in my chair and rubbed my temples. This wasn't going to be easy. I couldn't just rush into it. I had to think like her. Cold, calculating. Every step needed to be perfect. Later that day, I watched her carefully as she walked around the house pretending like nothing was wrong. She was nervous, I could tell. She avoided me, stayed busy with the kids, and barely spoke a word. But I wasn't about to let her off the hook that easily. She had no idea that I was already one step ahead. Let her think she could talk her way out of this. Let her believe she still had some control. I'd show her exactly how wrong she was. That night, after the kids went to bed, I heard her soft footsteps in the hallway. I sat on the couch watching the game, pretending not to notice when she came into the room. She stood there for a minute like she was trying to figure out what to say. "Lucas, can we talk?" Her voice was quiet, hesitant. The opposite of the woman I'd seen in that hotel lobby. I didn't even look at her. "What's there to talk about?" She hesitated again, shifting her weight. "About last night, I want to explain." "Explain what?" I snapped, finally turning to face her. "That you've been screwing around behind my back? Or that you think I'm too stupid to figure it out?" Her face went pale and she bit her lip. "No, it's not like that. I made a mistake. A huge mistake. And I'm sorry." The apology meant nothing. Not after what I'd seen, what I'd heard. But I let her keep talking, figuring the more she said, the deeper she'd dig herself into this mess. "I don't know what happened, Lucas. It just happened. I didn't mean to hurt you. I never wanted to hurt you." "Yeah, well, you did," I said, keeping my voice cold. "And you know what? I'm done with the lies." Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't falling for it this time. I had seen the real Emma, the one who didn't give a damn about me. The one who laughed while she wrapped herself around another man. This was all just an act, and I wasn't buying it. "I'll do anything," she whispered. "Please, let's fix this. I love you. I know I messed up, but I can make it right. Just give me a chance." It took everything I had not to laugh in her face. She wanted to fix things? After all this, I shook my head and stood up, walking toward the door. "You should have thought about that before you decided I wasn't enough." I could feel her eyes on me as I left the room, but I didn't care. I wasn't about to let her off with some half-assed apology. Not after what she'd done. Over the next few days, I started gathering the pieces of my plan. I needed to know everything. I wasn't just going to hit her with the affair. I was going to take everything away from her, just like she had taken everything from me. I spent hours combing through our finances, looking for anything out of place. Sure enough, there it was. Charges I didn't recognize. Restaurants, hotels, even gifts. She'd been spending our money on him. While I was working long hours, busting my ass to provide for our family, she was blowing it on fancy dinners and weekend getaways with her lover. I was furious, but at the same time, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. This was exactly what I needed. Proof that she hadn't just betrayed me emotionally, but financially too. Now I had her cornered. There was no way she could talk her way out of this. The next step was putting it all together. I needed to make sure everything was airtight. The video, the financial records, the timeline of her lies. It all had to be perfect. And once it was, I dropped the bomb. Not just on her, but on everyone. Her family, her friends, even her coworkers. I was going to destroy the perfect little world she had built for herself piece by piece. One night, while she was asleep, I sent a message to my lawyer friend. We hadn't spoken in a while, but I knew I could trust him. I explained the situation briefly, keeping it vague for now. He agreed to meet me later that week. We'd go over everything, and he'd help me figure out the best way to move forward. I wasn't just going to file for divorce. I was going to take her for everything she had. The house, the money, the kids, I wanted it all. In the meantime, I kept playing my part. I acted like everything was fine, like I was giving her the space to figure things out. But inside, I was preparing for the final blow. Every time she looked at me with those warning, guilty eyes, I reminded myself that this was her fault. She had done this, and she was going to pay for it. The closer I got to putting my plan into action, the more focused I became. I didn't have time for second thoughts or doubts. This was war, and I was going to win. By the time the meeting with my lawyer came around, I had everything I needed. We went over the evidence, video, bank statements, even emails I had managed to dig up. He was impressed. "You've got her nailed to the wall, man," he said, shaking his head. "She won't know what hit her." That was exactly what I wanted to hear. I left the meeting feeling more confident than ever. Emma had no idea what was coming. She thought she could worm her way out of this with tears and apologies, but I wasn't falling for it, not this time. A few days later, I sat down at the computer and began drafting an email. I attached the video along with a short message explaining everything. It was time for everyone to see the truth. I hovered over the send button for a second, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. But then I thought of her, laughing in that hotel lobby, and the anger flared up all over again. I hit send. Now it was just a matter of waiting for the fallout. The morning after I hit send, I woke up early again, feeling a strange mix of anticipation and dread. I couldn't help but wonder what was happening on the other side of those emails. Had her family seen the video yet? Her friends? Maybe her boss? Part of me wished I could watch it all unfold in real time, see their reactions when they found out who she really was. The other part of me, the one that used to love her, wondered if maybe I'd gone too far. I shook that thought off. I wasn't the one who destroyed us. That had been all her. I grabbed my phone and opened it up, checking my messages. Sure enough, there it was. Her name lit up my screen with a string of new texts. "Lucas, please, we need to talk. Why are you doing this? Please stop. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I skimmed through the messages without replying. There was nothing she could say now that would change anything. I had given her years of chances, and she had thrown every single one of them away. No more second guessing. No more giving her the benefit of the doubt. She wanted to treat me like I wasn't enough? Well, I was about to show her exactly what that felt like. Sipping my coffee, I thought about what came next. It wasn't enough just to humiliate her. That was only the beginning. Now that the video was out there, I had to make sure I covered my bases. I wasn't about to let her twist the story, paint herself as the victim. I knew how these things worked. If I didn't stay one step ahead, she'd use any crack in my plan to claw her way back. I grabbed my laptop and started digging. Divorce laws, custody battles, financial forensics, anything I could use to protect myself and my kids. My lawyer friend had been clear. With the video, I had a serious advantage, but it wouldn't last if I didn't act fast. The courts didn't always favor men in divorce, and I needed every piece of leverage I could get. Mid-research, another notification popped up. This time, it wasn't from Emma. It was from one of her friends, someone I barely knew, but who was still in the blast radius from the email. What the hell is going on? Why did you send that video? We thought you guys were doing fine. I stared at the message for a second before replying, "Ask Emma. She's got a lot of explaining to do." I wasn't going to waste my time justifying myself to people who had no idea what was really going on. Let them make their own judgments. The truth was out there, and I had nothing to hide. Emma, on the other hand, would be scrambling to explain herself, trying to salvage what little dignity she had left. Later that afternoon, I got a call from my lawyer. He wanted to go over the next steps in more detail now that the fallout had begun. We discussed the video, the financial records, and what we could expect once the divorce papers were served. "With what you've got, you should be in a good position," he said, his voice steady. "But it's not going to be easy. If she fights back, this could get ugly." I knew that already. Nothing about this was going to be clean or simple, but I wasn't backing down. I told him I was ready for whatever came next, that I'd do whatever it took to make sure Emma paid for what she did. He agreed to start preparing the paperwork and mentioned something I hadn't thought of yet: forensic accounting. "If she's been spending money behind your back, we'll need a clear picture of how much," he said. "I can recommend someone to go through your financials. It could help with the division of assets." I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "Do it," I said. "I want to know every cent she's wasted." The next few days felt like a waiting game. Every time my phone buzzed, I half expected it to be some new piece of fallout from the video. But it wasn't just Emma I was waiting on. I still needed to get my financial ducks in a row, and the forensic accountant my lawyer had recommended would need access to everything. I wasn't leaving any stone unturned. In the meantime, Emma tried again and again to reach out. She called, she texted, and even tried to talk to me face-to-face a couple of times. But I kept my distance. I wasn't ready for a confrontation. Not yet. I wanted to wait until I had everything lined up, so when I did face her, I'd be in complete control. A few days after sending the video, I finally got the call from the accountant. "Lucas, I've been going through your financials, and there's something I think you should see," he said, his voice low and serious. My heart sank. I knew Emma had been spending money on her affair, but hearing it confirmed was like a punch to the gut. "What did you find?" "There are several large withdrawals and transactions that don't match up with your normal spending patterns. We're talking about expensive dinners, hotel stays, and what looks like luxury purchases, clothes, jewelry, things like that. I've traced some of these charges back several months." I clenched my fist around the phone. It wasn't just a fling. It had been going on for a long time. Longer than I'd even realized. And she had been using our money to fund it. "How much are we talking?" I asked, my voice tense. "It's hard to say without going through everything in more detail, but we're looking at thousands, maybe tens of thousands. It's not just small, hidden charges. There are some pretty big-ticket items in here." I hung up the phone after thanking him, my mind racing. She hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. She had drained our resources, spent our money on another man, on their secret life together. It was the final straw, the last piece of the puzzle I needed. That evening, I sat Emma down at the kitchen table. I could see the panic in her eyes, the way her hands trembled as she folded them in front of her. She knew something was coming, but she had no idea just how deep she was in. "We need to talk," I said, my voice cold and firm. She nodded, her eyes wide. "I know. I've been trying to explain. I just—" I cut her off. "I don't want to hear your excuses, Emma. I know everything. The affair, the money, the lies. I've got the video, the financial records, everything." Her face went pale. She opened her mouth to say something, but I didn't let her. "I've already talked to a lawyer. The divorce papers are coming, and I'm going to take you for everything. The house, the money, custody of the kids. You think you can just throw me away like I was nothing? You think you can spend our money on your little affair, and I wouldn't find out? You're done." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. This wasn't the woman I loved anymore. This was someone else, someone who had torn our life apart for her own selfish needs. "Lucas, please," she whispered. "I know I made a mistake. I know I hurt you, but we can fix this. We can work through it." I shook my head. "No, you made sure there's no going back." She broke down then, sobbing into her hands. I watched her for a moment, but there was no satisfaction in it. All I felt was cold anger. I had spent years building a life with her, and she had destroyed it in a matter of months. Now it was her turn to deal with the consequences. After a few minutes, she looked up, her face streaked with tears. "What about the kids?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What are we going to tell them?" I hadn't thought that far ahead yet. The kids were the only thing that still connected us, the only part of our life that I cared about anymore. But even that wasn't enough to keep me from walking away from her arm. "I'll fight for custody," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not going to let you drag them through this mess." She nodded, her tears still flowing, but I didn't feel any sympathy. She had made her bed, and now she was going to lie in it. The next morning, I met with my lawyer to finalize the divorce papers. We went over everything, from the financials to the custody arrangements. He was confident that with the evidence I had, both the video and the records of her spending, I was in a strong position. "We'll get this filed as soon as possible," he said, sliding the papers across the table for me to sign. "Once it's done, she'll have no choice but to agree to the terms. If she fights it, we'll take her to court, but I doubt she'll want to drag this out." I nodded, signing my name at the bottom of the page. It was a strange feeling, putting my name on something that would officially end our marriage. But it wasn't sadness I'd felt, it was relief. As I left the lawyer's office, I checked my phone. Another message from Emma. "We need to talk." I didn't reply. In the days that followed, things moved quickly. The divorce papers were served, and the legal process began. Emma didn't try to fight it. I think she knew she had lost. Her family reached out to me, asking what had happened, but I kept my responses short and to the point. The video had done most of the explaining for me. One evening, as I was going through some old documents, I came across a photo of us, Emma and me, back when we first got married. We looked so happy, so full of hope for the future. I stared at the picture for a long time, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, regret, they all swirled together in a way that made my chest tighten. But I didn't dwell on it for long. That part of my life was over. Emma had made her choice, and now I was making mine. The final piece of the puzzle came a few days later when the forensic accountant finished his report. He confirmed what I already knew. Emma had been draining our accounts for months, funneling money into her affair. But there was more. Hidden investments, secret accounts, things I hadn't even thought to look for. She had been planning this for a long time, long before I ever caught on. I took the report to my lawyer, and he smiled as he looked it over. "This is it," he said, tapping the page. "She's done." I nodded, feeling a sense of finality wash over me. It was over. The betrayal, the tears, the pain, it was all coming to an end. But there was still one more thing to do. That night, I sat down with Emma one last time. She was pale, her eyes red from crying, but I didn't feel any sympathy. This was the woman who had destroyed our life, and now she was about to face the consequences. "I'm done, Emma," I said, my voice cold. "I'm filing for divorce, and I'm taking everything. The house, the kids, the money. You brought this on yourself." She nodded, tears streaming down her face, but I didn't waver. This was my moment, my final act of revenge. And as I walked out the door, I knew that I had won. Finally, I was free. Once the divorce papers were filed, the ball was rolling. There was no going back. Not for me, and certainly not for Emma. I wasn't about to stop there, though. I had more than legal documents in my arsenal. I had her lies, her infidelity, her financial betrayal, and that was all ammunition I was prepared to use. My plan was already set in motion, and now it was time to execute it. The first step was simple: exposure. That video I'd captured of her in the hotel with her lover, it was more than just proof for the courts. It was the final nail in the coffin of the perfect life she pretended to have. I wasn't going to let her walk away with her reputation intact, not after everything she had done. So I sent it out. I made sure it landed in every inbox that mattered: her close friends, her co-workers, even her boss. I didn't add much to it. Just a simple message that said, "Enough. This is who Emma really is." Then I hit send. There was a moment of hesitation, a fleeting thought about the destruction I was about to cause. But that was gone as fast as it came. She deserved every bit of it. For the next few hours, I just waited. I didn't check my phone, didn't look at the emails. I let the silence hang, knowing that on the other side, Emma's world was unraveling. Then the calls started coming in. First, her family. They were angry, of course, accusing me of blowing things out of proportion, making a private matter public. "You didn't have to do it this way, Lucas," her sister said, her voice sharp and judgmental, like I was the bad guy here. "What about the kids? Did you even think about them?" I held my ground. "You think I'm the one that caused this? Maybe ask Emma about the hotel nights, the dinners, and the vacations she's been taking with her boyfriend, using our money. The kids? She didn't think about them either when she was doing all that." Her sister hung up on me, but I didn't care. The line was drawn, and I wasn't about to let anyone guilt me for protecting myself. Emma's family might not understand, but they weren't the ones who had to live with her lies for all those years. Later that day, I got another call. This time, it was her boss. He was more careful with his words, probably thinking about legal implications, but the message was clear. Emma was being placed on leave while they reviewed the situation. I could almost hear the disappointment in his voice. He didn't know the whole story, but the video had done enough damage. Her reputation at work was shot. A small part of me wondered if maybe I'd gone too far, but that was quickly silenced. This wasn't just about getting back at her. It was about ensuring that she didn't walk away from this unscathed. She had made her choices, and now she was facing the consequences. Over the next few days, the fallout continued. Friends reached out, some of them shocked, others trying to stay neutral. Emma, meanwhile, kept her distance. She stopped trying to call, stopped sending the desperate texts. I assumed she was too busy dealing with the chaos I'd unleashed. I wasn't done yet, though. The legal battle was still ahead, and I knew she wouldn't go down without a fight, especially now that her image was ruined. Her family might have been furious with me, but they'd probably back her in the divorce proceedings. I had to be ready. That's when the complications started. Emma's family pushed back hard, demanding I stop the public shaming and threatening to get their own lawyers involved. They claimed I was being vindictive, dragging their daughter through the mud, turning what should have been a private matter into a public scandal. For a second, I questioned myself. Was I going too far? Was this all necessary? But no, I couldn't let them get into my head. I had spent too long being the passive one, the trusting husband who believed Emma's lies. They didn't know what it felt like to be betrayed, to be used. I had given her everything, and she'd thrown it all away without a second thought. No, I wasn't going to back down now, not when I was so close to ending it. Still, I had to be smart. The last thing I wanted was to lose my advantage because I let their words get to me. So I recalibrated. I stopped focusing on the public humiliation. Emma's life was already in shambles, and there was no point in giving her family any more ammunition. Instead, I turned my attention back to the legal battle. This was where the real damage would be done. I met with my lawyer again to refine our strategy. She's going to push back, I told him. Her family's already circling the wagons. They'll come at me with everything they have. He nodded, calm as ever. Let them. You've got more than enough leverage, and the financial records you've uncovered give us an even stronger case. The key now is to keep the pressure on. We'll make sure she can't wriggle out of this without losing everything. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. We worked on the divorce filings, making sure every detail was covered. The financial records were damning. She had drained thousands from our joint accounts to fund her affair. Luxury dinners, weekend trips, gifts. It was all there in black and white. And now that it was in my lawyer's hands, there was no hiding it. Over the next few weeks, I stayed focused on the legal side of things. I wasn't concerned with what Emma was doing anymore. I knew she was scrambling, trying to salvage what little she could. Her family might have been angry, but they weren't going to be able to help her now, not with the mountain of evidence against her. But even though I was winning, there was something gnawing at me. Every now and then when things got quiet, I'd feel it, a hollow emptiness where the anger used to be. The satisfaction of revenge was still there, but it was starting to fade. And in its place, I felt tired. I hadn't expected that. One evening, after a long day of meetings with my lawyer, I sat down in the living room and just stared at the blank TV screen. The house was silent. The kids were with their grandparents for the weekend, and Emma had moved out to stay with a friend. I had won, or at least I was on the verge of winning, but it didn't feel the way I thought it would. Revenge had consumed me for weeks, but now that I was in the thick of it, I started to wonder what came after. What was left once this was all over? Emma would be out of my life, sure, but so would the life we had built together. The house would be mine, the kids too, but the family I thought I had, it was gone. And even though Emma was the one who had destroyed it, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd lost something in the process as well. I tried to push those thoughts away. There was no time for second guessing. I had to stay focused, keep moving forward. The divorce wasn't finalized yet, and until it was, I couldn't let up. But the doubt lingered. A few days later, I got a message from Emma. It was the first time I'd heard from her since the day I sat her down with the financial records. Can we talk? Just one last time? At first, I ignored it. There was nothing left to say. But after a few hours, I found myself replying, Fine. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. I wasn't sure why I agreed to it. Maybe part of me wanted to see her face one more time, to get some final closure before the divorce was official. Or maybe I just wanted to hear what excuse she'd come up with this time. Either way, it didn't matter. I wasn't going to let her change anything. The next evening, she showed up on time. I was sitting at the kitchen table when she walked in. She looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, hair a mess. It was a far cry from the confident, smug woman I had confronted in that hotel lobby. I didn't feel sorry for her, though. This was the bed she had made, and now she had to lie in it. She sat down across from me, her hands trembling slightly. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. I waited for her to break the silence. Lucas, I know I've messed up. I know I don't deserve anything from you. But, she trailed off, her voice cracking. I'm pregnant. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. Pregnant? My mind reeled as I tried to process what she had just said. And it might not be yours. That last part came out in a whisper, but it was enough to turn my stomach. My hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white with anger. This was it, her final betrayal. It wasn't enough that she had destroyed our marriage, spent our money, and lied to me for months. Now she was carrying a child that might not even be mine. I stayed silent for a long time, letting the weight of her words sink in. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face, but I didn't care. I had nothing left to say to her. Finally, I stood up and walked to the door. "Get out," I said, my voice cold and steady. "Lucas, please, get out." She hesitated for a moment, then grabbed her coat and left without another word. As the door closed behind her, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. It was over. She had nothing left to throw at me. I had won. The next morning, I called my lawyer and told him about the pregnancy. He assured me that it wouldn't affect the divorce proceedings, especially since there was a question of paternity. But even if the child wasn't mine, it didn't change the fact that I was done with her. The paperwork was already in motion, and soon enough she'd be out of my life for good. It was a bittersweet victory, but a victory nonetheless. The meeting was set for the following evening. I wasn't surprised that she agreed so quickly. Emma had been desperate ever since the truth came out. The texts, the calls, the pleading, all of it told me that she was on the edge, grasping for anything that might give her some control back. But what she didn't understand was that control was now completely out of her hands. I arrived at the cafe a few minutes early, wanting to settle in before she got there. I wasn't nervous. In fact, I was calmer than I had been in weeks. This was the moment I had been working toward, and I was ready. As I sat at the small table nursing a cup of black coffee, I replayed everything I had learned over the past few months. The affair, the lies, the financial betrayal. It all stacked up against her like a mountain she'd never be able to climb, and tonight I would make sure she knew that. Emma walked in exactly on time, her eyes scanning the room nervously until they landed on me. She looked rough, disheveled, like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were red, her makeup smeared. I couldn't help but notice how different she looked now compared to the woman I had once known. The confident, self-assured facade was completely gone. She was a shell of herself, and I didn't feel the least bit sorry. She approached the table slowly, like she was walking toward her own execution. I didn't bother standing up. I just watched her sit down across from me, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them in her lap. For a long moment, neither of us said a word. I let the silence hang between us, thick with everything left unsaid. She was the first to break. "Lucas?" Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "I know I've messed up. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need to explain." I raised an eyebrow, leaning back in my chair. "Explain? After everything that's come out, you think there's something left to explain?" Her eyes filled with tears instantly, but I wasn't moved. I had seen enough of her crocodile tears over the past few weeks to know they were just another tactic. She was playing her final card, trying to appeal to whatever humanity she thought I had left for her. But she had miscalculated. "I didn't want it to happen this way, she said, her voice cracking. "I never meant for it to get this far. I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted." I scoffed, shaking my head. "Confused? That's your excuse for blowing thousands of dollars of our money on a guy behind my back? Confusion doesn't pay for luxury vacations and dinners, Emma. Confusion doesn't send you to a hotel room with another man. Don't insult me." She flinched, her hands gripping each other tighter in her lap. I know I messed up, but I was lost, Lucas. I felt like you didn't see me anymore. You were always at work, always too busy, and I needed something else, something to make me feel alive again." Her words were meant to cut, to shift the blame onto me, but I wasn't falling for it. Not this time. "And your answer to that was to cheat, to drain our accounts and betray me?" I leaned forward, my voice low and cold. "You should have left me if you were so unhappy. You should have had the guts to walk away, instead of sneaking around like a coward." Emma's tears spilled over now, streaming down her cheeks as she shook her head. "I never wanted to leave. I don't know why I did it. It just happened. And now I'm pregnant, Lucas. I don't know what to do." The mention of the pregnancy hit me again, just like the first time. My gut twisted, but I forced myself to remain calm. She was trying to use this to save herself, trying to manipulate me with the idea of a child. But she didn't realize that it only solidified my resolve. Whether the baby was mine or not, it didn't change anything. We were done. You don't know what to do? I echoed, my voice barely above a growl. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to sign the divorce papers. You're going to accept the terms, because if you don't, I'll drag you through court until there's nothing left of you. Do you understand that? Her eyes widened in panic. Lucas, please. You can't do this. We can still fix this. We can make it right for the baby, for the kids. Please, just give me one more chance. I stared at her, feeling a strange sense of detachment. It was like I was watching a stranger beg for mercy. The woman sitting in front of me wasn't the same person I had fallen in love with all those years ago. She was someone else entirely, and I couldn't believe I had ever been blind enough to trust her. There are no more chances, Emma, I said, my voice steady. This isn't something you can fix. You've destroyed everything. I don't even know if that baby is mine, and frankly, I don't care anymore. Her face crumpled as she broke into full sobs, her body shaking as she cried. I watched her for a moment, feeling nothing but a cold, hollow satisfaction. This was the woman who had smiled at me while she lied, who had laughed with another man while she drained our accounts. Now she was broken, and there was no coming back from it. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table to her. These are the divorce papers, I said. My lawyers already looked them over. You're not getting the house, you're not getting custody, and you're sure as hell not getting another dime from me. Her hands shook as she opened the folder, scanning the pages through her tears. This can't be happening, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I never wanted it to end like this. Well, it did, I said, standing up, and now you're going to deal with it. I turned to leave, but as I walked away, she called out to me one last time. Lucas, wait! Her voice was frantic, desperate. I stopped but didn't turn around. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I know I don't deserve anything from you, but please, don't take the kids away from me. They're all I have left. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting her words sink in. The kids were the only part of this whole mess that still mattered to me, but I wasn't going to let her guilt me into anything. Not after everything she had done. I'm not taking the kids away from you, I said without turning back. But I'm sure as hell not going to let you drag them through your mess. I'll fight for full custody, and you'll see them on my terms. That's how this is going to work. With that, I walked out of the cafe, leaving her behind. I didn't need to look back to know that she was falling apart. Her sobs echoed in my ears as I pushed the door open and stepped into the cool night air. The confrontation was over, and I had come out on top. But instead of feeling the triumph I had expected, there was only a dull sense of finality. It was done. The next morning, I met with my lawyer to finalize the details of the divorce. I told him about the pregnancy and the possibility that the baby wasn't mine. He reassured me that we would handle the paternity issue once the child was born, but for now we could move forward with the rest of the case. We were almost there, just a few more steps, and Emma would be out of my life for good. As I sat in his office signing the final papers, I felt a strange sense of closure. This chapter of my life was ending, and while it hadn't gone the way I had planned, I had fought my way through it. I had taken control, and now I was free. But as I left the office and walked to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in me. Revenge had been my fuel for so long, but now that it was all over, I felt empty. The anger was gone, but so was the satisfaction. What was left? I sat in my car for a long time, staring out the window at the world moving on around me. The divorce was just days away from being finalized. Emma would be left with nothing, and I would have full custody of the kids. I had won, but it didn't feel like a victory. The final confrontation with Emma had been everything I'd planned, but it hadn't brought the closure I thought it would. Instead, it left me with a hollow sense of loss. Not for Emma or for the life we had built together, that was long gone, but for the part of myself that had been consumed by the need for revenge. I had become someone else over the past few months, someone I wasn't sure I recognized. And now that it was all over, I wasn't sure who I was supposed to be anymore. But one thing was clear. Emma was out of my life, and I was free to move forward. As I started the car and drove away, I realized that the real battle wasn't with her anymore. It was with myself and with the pieces of my life that were left. In the weeks that followed, the divorce was finalized, and Emma was officially out of my life. The court granted me full custody of the kids, and she was left with nothing but the memories of what she had thrown away. There was a strange sense of finality to it all, like the end of a chapter that had dragged on far too long. Moving into a new apartment with the kids was my first real step toward rebuilding. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours, and that was all that mattered. I didn't need the big house or the perfect image we'd tried to maintain for so many years. I was learning to let go of those illusions. It had all been smoke and mirrors anyway, and now, with Emma gone, I could finally breathe. The weight of her lies had lifted, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could focus on myself and the kids without the shadow of her betrayal hanging over us. The kids adjusted surprisingly well. They were young, and while they didn't fully understand the details of what had happened between their mother and me, they sensed the tension was gone. They didn't ask too many questions, and I didn't feel the need to offer explanations beyond what was necessary. Emma still saw them on the weekends, but it was clear that our old life together, the one where we pretended everything was fine, was gone for good. And I was okay with that. I threw myself into work, taking on extra shifts at the construction site to keep my mind busy and my hands occupied. There was something cathartic about the physical labor, about building something solid and tangible, especially after everything in my life had felt so unstable for so long. The routine of it all helped me regain my footing. It wasn't just about making money to support the kids. It was about finding a sense of purpose again. And with each day, I felt a little more like myself. But there were quiet moments too, late at night when the kids were asleep and the apartment was silent. Those were the times when the weight of everything hit me. Not the anger or the bitterness that had burned out long ago, but the emptiness. I'd spent months focused on revenge, on making sure Emma paid for what she did. But now that it was over, I found myself wondering what came next. It was like I'd been running a race only to cross the finish line and realize there was nothing waiting for me on the other side. I wasn't the same person I had been before all of this. I was harder now, more guarded. Trust didn't come easily anymore, and I caught myself second-guessing everything, even in my interactions with people who had nothing to do with what Emma had done. It wasn't just about her, it was about how I saw the world. How I saw myself. I had let my guard down once, and it had cost me everything. I wasn't about to make that mistake again. But there was also a quiet strength in that realization. I had survived. I had made it through the worst of it, and while I wasn't sure where the road ahead would take me, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let anyone take control of my life again. I wasn't going to be that passive guy who let things happen to him. I had fought my way through the betrayal, the divorce, the aftermath, and I had come out the other side. Maybe not unscathed, but stronger, wiser. Old friends started reaching out again, people I hadn't spoken to in years. They had heard about the divorce, the fallout with Emma, and they wanted to reconnect. At first, I was hesitant. I had cut a lot of people out during the worst of it, not wanting to deal with the questions, the sympathy. But now I felt ready to let some of them back in. I started meeting up with a few guys from work for beers after our shifts, just talking about normal things, sports, life, anything, but the mess that had consumed my world for so long. It was a small step, but it felt good. I even reconnected with an old buddy, Greg, who I hadn't seen since before everything went south with Emma. He had been one of the few people who tried to warn me when things first started going wrong, but I hadn't listened back then. I was too caught up in trying to hold my marriage together, too blind to see what was right in front of me. But now, sitting across from him at a bar one Friday night, it felt like old times. We didn't talk about Emma or the divorce. We didn't need to. We just picked up where we had left off, like no time had passed at all. Through all of this, I realized something important. My life wasn't over because my marriage had ended. If anything, it was just beginning. I had spent so many years tied down to an illusion, to a woman who had betrayed me, that I had forgotten what it felt like to live for myself. Now I had that chance again. I wasn't tied to anyone's expectations, anyone's lies. I was free. And with that freedom came a sense of peace I hadn't expected. The anger I had carried with me for so long, the need for revenge, it was gone now. In its place was a quiet understanding that I had done what I needed to do. I had taken control of my life again, and that was enough. I didn't need to keep looking back at what had happened. The past was behind me, and the future, while uncertain, was mine to shape. The day the divorce was finalized, I stood outside the courthouse, looking up at the clear blue sky. It felt symbolic in a way, like a new beginning. There was no dramatic moment, no final showdown with Emma. Just a quiet end to a chapter that had been dragging on for far too long. She had made her choices, and now I was making mine. As I walked to my car, I felt a strange sense of closure. Not the kind that comes with revenge or winning a battle, but the kind that comes from knowing you've survived something that could have destroyed you. The kind that comes from understanding that while you may be scarred, you're still standing. The next few months were about rebuilding, but this time it wasn't about revenge or proving something to anyone else. It was about finding my way forward. I started small, getting the apartment organized, setting up a routine with the kids, making sure they knew that no matter what had happened with their mother, I was there for them. That was my priority now. Not the past, not the mistakes, but the future. Their future. Our future. Looking back on everything, I realized that revenge had its place, but it wasn't the end game. It had given me the strength to fight through the worst of it, but it wasn't what was going to help me move forward. That had to come from something else, something deeper. And slowly, I was finding that within myself. As the weeks turned into months, I started to feel like myself again. Not the person I had been before Emma's betrayal, but a new version of myself. Someone who had been through hell and come out the other side. Someone who knew his worth and wasn't afraid to stand up for it. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. I had nothing to hide, nothing to fear. I had won the legal battle, but more importantly, I had won the battle within myself. I had taken back control of my life, and I wasn't about to let anyone take that away from me again. As I stood in my new apartment one evening looking out over the city as the sun set, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The case, the anger, the pain, it was all behind me now. What lay ahead was up to me. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I was okay with that. I had survived the storm, and now I was ready for whatever came next.